I thought being treated like the family mistake was the worst part, but that dinner was just the spark. A week later, I arrived at my $1.2 million house to find my locks changed and my father's girlfriend moving in. They laughed in my face until the locksmith stared at the paperwork and read the maiden name on the deed aloud. That was the exact second everything they thought they stole slipped right through their fingers. My name is Lily Scott, and for 29 years, I existed in the margins of the Whitmore family history. I was the daughter who was too quiet, too studious, and eventually, too independent. I lived in Franklin, Tennessee, a town that prides itself on Southern charm and history, where neighbors wave from porch swings and sweet tea is a religion. But that charm always seemed to stop right at the threshold of my father's house. I had built a life for myself outside of that cold radius. I worked as a senior user experience designer at Bright Hive Digital Lab, a job that required empathy, logic, and the ability to predict human behavior. It was ironic. Really, I could map out the complex emotional journey of a user navigating a banking app, yet I remained completely blind to the user interface of my own family until it was far too late. The notification lit up my phone on a Tuesday afternoon. It was not a question. It was a summons. Family dinner, 6 o'clock, don't be late. There was no explanation. My father, Ray Whitmore, did not believe in context. He believed in compliance. I stared at the screen, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest, the phantom weight of childhood anxiety that never fully dissipates. I almost typed back a refusal. I had deadlines. I had a life. I had a house that I had bought with my own money, a sanctuary where the air was light and the walls did not whisper judgments. But guilt is a powerful code, programmed deep into the motherboard of a child raised by a narcissist. So I cleared my schedule. I put on a dress that was modest enough to avoid criticism, but expensive enough to armor myself. I drove the 15 miles to the house where I grew up, unaware that I was driving straight into an ambush. When I pulled into the driveway, the warning signs were already there. Though I chose to ignore them, there were too many cars. My sister Kendra's beat-up sedan was parked crookedly on the grass, a testament to her chaotic approach to life. Behind it was my Uncle Jerry's truck, and tucked near the garage was a sleek, silver convertible I did not recognize. The house itself looked the same as always, a sprawling brick structure that Ray maintained with obsessive precision, but the energy radiating from it felt different. It felt charged. Static electricity before a lightning strike. I walked to the front door, my keys in my hand, but before I could slide the key into the lock, the door swung open. It was not my father. It was not Kendra. Standing there, blocking the entryway like a sentinel, was a woman I had met only twice before, Sloane Mercer. My father's new girlfriend was a study in calculated aesthetics. She was perhaps 10 years older than me, but she dressed as if she were the grand matriarch of a dynasty. She wore a cream-colored cashmere sweater that likely cost more than Kendra's car, and her hair was coiffed into a rigid golden helmet. She did not smile. She did not step aside. She just looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my shoes, then my bag, calculating the value of my existence in real time. "You're late," Sloane said. Her voice was smooth, lacking any genuine warmth. "It is 5:58, I replied, checking my watch. "I'm early." She didn't argue. She simply turned her back on me and walked into the foyer, her heels clicking a sharp, military rhythm on the hardwood. Ray hates it when people cut it close. It shows a lack of respect. I followed her in, the air inside the house heavy with the smell of roast beef and old resentments. I expected a casual gathering, perhaps a birthday I had forgotten, or an announcement about a vacation. Instead, I walked into a courtroom. The dining room was already full. My father sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid. Ray Whitmore was a man who took up space not with his physical size, but with his ego. He held a glass of dark liquor, his eyes fixed on the centerpiece as if it were a profound puzzle. Kendra sat to his right, scrolling on her phone, her face set in a permanent scowl. Uncle Jerry and Aunt Linda were there too, huddled together like jurors who had already decided the verdict. No one looked up when I entered. No one said hello. The table was set with the good china, the plates with the gold rim that were strictly reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas. There were 6 chairs. 5 of them were occupied or clearly claimed. The only empty spot was at the very far end of the table. Opposite my father, it was the position of a stranger or a defendant. "Sit down, Lily," my father said. Without looking at me, I pulled out the heavy oak chair. The scrape of the legs against the floor sounded violent in the silence. I sat. I placed my purse on the floor. I folded my hands in my lap. I waited. Sloane glided to the seat at my father's left, effectively completing the wall of opposition. She picked up a linen napkin and snapped it open with a flourish before placing it delicately on her lap. That was the signal. The silence broke. But not with conversation. It broke with an attack. "Must be nice," Kendra said, not looking up from her phone. Her voice was sharp, like tearing paper. "Having a job where you can just leave whenever you want. Some of us actually have to work for a living." I took a slow breath. Kendra worked part-time at a retail boutique and had quit 3 jobs in the last year. "I work hard. Kendra, you know that. You sit at a computer," Kendra shot back, finally looking at me. Her eyes were rimmed with dark liner, making her glare feel even more intense. "You think you're so much better than us because you moved to the other side of town and bought that big, empty house? You think you're royalty?" "I don't think I'm royalty," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I think I'm an adult who pays her own mortgage." "That's exactly the problem," Ray cut in. His voice was a low rumble. He set his glass down hard enough that the liquid splashed against the rim. "You talk about money like it's something you invented. Lily, like you didn't stand on my shoulders to get it." I looked at him, confused. "Dad, I've been financially independent since I was 22. I paid off my own student loans." Ray laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Student loans. That's the tip of the iceberg. What about the 18 years before that? The food? The clothes? The dance lessons you quit after 2 months? The braces?" He gestured around the room, encompassing the family. "I sacrificed everything to build this family. I poured every cent I had into you kids, and what do I get? You move out, you hoard your money, and you leave your family to struggle." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Struggle? Dad, you just bought a new truck last month. Sloane is wearing a designer sweater. Who is struggling?" Sloane leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Ray is too proud to tell you the truth, Lily, but since you are bringing up finances, let us be clear. He is tired. He has worked his fingers to the bone for decades, and now, when he should be relaxing, he is worrying about the future." "And that is my fault?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "It is your obligation," Sloane corrected. "In any decent family, the children who succeed give back to the parents who made them. It is not charity, it is a debt." I looked around the table. Uncle Jerry was studying his fork. Aunt Linda was staring at the wall. Kendra was smirking, a look of pure toxic triumph on her face. They had discussed this. This wasn't a dinner. It was an intervention for a problem that didn't exist. They had sat in this room before I arrived and agreed on a narrative. Lily has money. We want money. Therefore, Lily owes us money. "I am not an investment portfolio, Dad," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You cannot calculate the cost of raising a child and send them an invoice when they turn 29. "I can call it a failed investment," Ray said coldly. The words hit me like a physical blow. "If you put money into a stock and it gives 0 returns, you cut it loose, or you demand a refund." "A refund," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "You want me to pay you back for my childhood?" "I want you to make things right," Ray said. He picked up his knife and fork, slicing into the meat on his plate as if the conversation were over. "Kendra needs help with her rent. The roof here needs repairs. And Sloane and we need security." Sloane took a sip of her wine, her eyes locking onto mine over the rim of the glass. "You have that massive house all to yourself. Lily, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, ideally located. It is practically a waste for one person. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I stared at her. Excuse me? I'm just saying, Sloane continued, her tone conversational, as if suggesting a new paint color. Ray has always wanted a place with a sunroom. Your house has that lovely sunroom. And the master suite on the ground floor? It would be perfect for his knees. My house is not available, I said, gripping the edge of the table. It is my home. It is a Whitmore asset, Kendra chimed in, pointing her fork at me. You're a Whitmore. Anything you have, you got because of Dad. So technically, it belongs to the family. That is not how the law works, I snapped. The law, Ray scoffed. Always quoting rules. That is the problem with you. Lily, you have no heart. You have a calculator where your heart should be. You see a piece of paper that says deed, and you think that matters more than blood. It matters more than greed, I said. The silence that followed was total. Uncle Jerry finally looked up, his eyes wide. Kendra's mouth dropped open. Ray turned purple. He stood up, his chair screeching backward. Get out, he whispered. I didn't wait for him to say it louder. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to hold me. I looked at Kendra, who was beaming with the joy of seeing me exiled. I looked at Sloane, who was calmly buttering a roll, already mentally redecorating my living room. I looked at my father, the man who was supposed to protect me, and realized he saw me only as a resource to be harvested. I'm leaving, I said, but don't think for 1 second that I owe you anything, not a cent, and definitely not my home. We'll see, Sloane said softly, not looking up. Family has a way of working things out. I grabbed my purse and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it firmly, hearing the latch click like the final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. The evening air was cool, but my skin was burning. I walked to my car, my hands trembling so hard I dropped my keys on the pavement. As I crouched to pick them up, I looked back at the house. Through the dining room window, I could see the warm glow of the chandelier. They were eating. They were talking. They were probably laughing. They had successfully cut out the tumor, the one person who reminded them that their failures were their own. I got into the car and locked the doors immediately. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but the shock was too dry, too abrasive for tears. I felt hollowed out, as if they had reached inside my chest and scooped out my history, leaving nothing but a cavity. I started the engine and reversed out of the driveway, desperate to put distance between me and the people who shared my DNA. I drove on autopilot, the dark roads of Franklin blurring past me. I replayed the conversation in my mind, cataloging every insult, every threat, failed investment, waste of space, Whitmore asset. They truly believed it. That was the most terrifying part. They weren't just being cruel. They were righteous. They believed my success was a theft from their potential. My phone pinged in the passenger seat. I ignored it at first, merging onto the highway, but then it pinged again. A persistent, demanding sound. I waited until I hit a red light near the town center. I picked up the phone, expecting a barrage of hate texts from Kendra or a demanding voicemail from Ray. It was a text message from a number I did not save. The area code was local, but the digits were unfamiliar. I opened it. Don't let them touch your papers. Lily, you think this is just a bad dinner. It's not. They have been planning this. You don't understand who they really are. There was no signature. I stared at the words, the red light turning green above me. A horn honked behind me, jarring me back to reality. I stepped on the gas, my heart hammering against my ribs. Don't let them touch your papers. I thought about the deed to my house. I thought about the spare key I had given my father 3 years ago, back when I still thought our relationship was salvageable. Back when I thought he might need to get in for an emergency. A cold dread, colder than the dinner, settled in my stomach. Sloane's comment about the sunroom wasn't a wish. It was a plan. I drove faster. I needed to get home. I needed to see my house. I needed to touch the walls and know that they were still mine. But as the miles flew by, I couldn't shake the feeling that the dinner was just the opening ceremony. The real game had already started, and I was the only one who didn't know the rules. The week following that disastrous dinner felt less like time passing and more like a fever breaking. I stayed in a hotel downtown, needing the sterility of white sheets and the anonymity of a room service menu. I told myself I was just decompressing, letting the radioactive dust of the family explosions settle before I returned to my sanctuary. That was what my house in Franklin was to me. It was not just a building composed of brick and mortar valued at $1.2 million. It was the only physical evidence that I had survived a divorce that nearly broke me, and a childhood that had tried to mold me into a servant. I had bought it with my own earnings, signed every check with a shaking hand, and decorated it with a minimalism that soothed my cluttered mind. It was the one place on earth where I did not have to defend my existence, or so I thought. I drove back on a Tuesday morning, the sky a bruised purple over the Tennessee hills. I had convinced myself that my father's threats were merely the alcohol talking, the bluster of a man who felt his control slipping. I expected to find my house exactly as I had left it, quiet, empty, and mine. As I turned onto my street, the air in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. My driveway, usually a pristine stretch of concrete, was occupied. My father's heavy-duty pickup truck was parked diagonally across the entrance, marking territory like a feral animal. Its bumper sticker, fading and aggressive, seemed to mock me, but it was not the truck that made my blood run cold. It was the porch. I parked my car on the street and stepped out, the gravel crunching loudly under my boots. My eyes locked onto the front steps. When I had left, the porch was bare, clean, and architectural. Now, 2 massive terracotta pots overflowing with yellow chrysanthemums flanked the door. I hated chrysanthemums. They were the flowers of funeral parlors and forced cheerfulness. Between them lay a new doormat. It was thick, woven, and bore the cursive, undeniable inscription, "Bless this home." It was the decor of a woman nesting. It was the aesthetic of a takeover. I walked up the driveway, my heartbeat thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached the front door, my hand diving into my purse for my keys. I needed to get inside. I needed to see that my furniture was still there, that the air still smelled like my bergamot candles. I jammed the key into the deadbolt. It stopped halfway. I frowned, jiggling it. Perhaps some grit had gotten inside. I pushed harder, twisting with a desperation that was quickly turning into panic. The key would not turn. It would not even seat fully into the cylinder. I pulled it out and looked at the brass teeth, then at the lock. The finish on the lock was different. Mine had been a matte black, modern and understated. This one was shiny, polished brass, looking cheap and garish against the dark wood of the door. They had changed the locks. The realization hit me with the force of a physical slap. I stood there, freezing on my own porch, locked out of the life I had paid for. Rage, hot and blinding, surged up my throat. I raised my fist and pounded on the wood. "Open the door!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Open this door right now!" I didn't have to wait long. The lock clicked, the smooth, well-oiled sound of fresh hardware, and the door swung inward. Sloane stood there. She was not dressed for a visit. She was wearing a silk robe that shimmered in the morning light, cinched loosely at her waist. Her feet were bare. She held a steaming mug of coffee in one hand, my mug, the handmade ceramic one I had bought at an art festival in Nashville. Behind her, the foyer was a chaotic landscape of invasion. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls. A suitcase lay open on the entryway bench, spilling clothes onto the floor. Sloane took a sip of coffee, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Lily, you are making a lot of noise for this time of morning. The neighbors will talk." "What are you doing in my house?" I demanded, stepping forward. Sloane didn't budge. She leaned against the doorframe, blocking my path. "Living here, obviously. Ray mentioned you might stop by, but we didn't think it would be so soon. We are still unpacking." "Unpacking?" I repeated. The word felt foreign in my mouth. "You don't live here. This is my house. I am the owner. Get out." Sloane sighed. A long, theatrical exhalation. Ray told me you would be difficult. Look, honey, Ray said the house is now family property. He decided it was time to consolidate our assets. He told me to move in, so I moved in. It is really that simple. He doesn't have the right to tell you that, I screamed, losing the battle for composure. He doesn't own this place. Lily, please. The voice came from the living room. My father walked into view. He was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, looking for all the world like a man enjoying a lazy Sunday in his own domain. He wiped crumbs from his mouth and walked toward us, his expression weary. Stop making a scene, Ray said, frowning at me. You are embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? I pointed a shaking finger at the new lock. You broke into my house. You changed the locks. That is a felony. Dad, that is breaking and entering. Ray laughed, a dismissive snort that made my stomach churn. Don't use legal words you don't understand. Lily, it's not breaking and entering if it is family. I had a locksmith come out because you weren't answering your phone and we needed to get settled. You were being irresponsible, disappearing like that. I was at a hotel because you insulted me. I was teaching you a lesson, Ray corrected, crossing his arms. And now I'm teaching you another one. You have this massive house, $1.2 million sitting here, and you are barely in it. You are always at work or traveling. It is a waste, a sin. Really. Sloan and I need a place that fits our status. We are doing you a favor. We are keeping the pipes warm. You are stealing my home, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I want you out, now, or I'm calling the police. Ray stepped out onto the porch, forcing me to take a step back. He loomed over me, using his height to intimidate, a tactic that had worked when I was 7 but failed now that I was 29. Go ahead, call them. Tell them your father is staying in your house. Do you know how stupid you will look? I am your father. I raised you. This house is just as much mine as it is yours, because without me, you would be nothing. Show me the papers, I said, holding out my hand. If this is your house, show me the deed. Show me the transfer of title. Show me anything that has your name on it. Ray waved his hand as if swatting away a fly. Papers. That is all you care about. Papers are for strangers. Lily. Papers are for banks and lawyers. Family operates on trust, on blood. You are so obsessed with bureaucracy you have forgotten what loyalty means. Sloan is just staying here temporarily until we get things sorted. You are blowing this out of proportion. If it is temporary, why are there movers? I gestured to the boxes. Why did you change the locks? Security, Sloan chimed in, smiling sweetly. We didn't know who else had a key. A single woman living alone? You could have given a key to anyone. We had to be safe. Before I could respond, a car screeched up to the curb behind mine. The loud, thumping bass of a pop song cut through the tension. It was Kendra. Of course it was Kendra. She must have been on standby, waiting for the fireworks. She hopped out of her car, her phone already held high. The camera lens pointed directly at me. She marched up the driveway, a gleam of malicious excitement in her eyes. There she is, Kendra announced to her live stream, or whatever audience she was performing for. The ungrateful daughter returning to kick her own elderly father out on the street. Look at her face. Guys, she looks like she is ready to kill someone over a pile of bricks. Put the phone away, Kendra, I said, turning my back to the camera. Why? Are you ashamed? Kendra circled me, thrusting the phone closer. Dad is just trying to live his life, and you are acting like a psychopath. You have plenty of money, but why are you so greedy? Why can't you share? This isn't sharing, I yelled, finally snapping. This is theft. Oh, listen to the drama queen, Kendra narrated, laughing. She calls her family thieves. This is what happens when people get a little bit of money. Everyone, they forget where they came from. I looked at them. Ray, standing with his arms crossed, radiating entitlement. Sloan, smirking in my doorway, wearing my life like a costume. Kendra, circling like a vulture, monetizing my misery. They were a united front, a wall of delusion so thick that no amount of logic could penetrate it. They truly believed they were in the right. They believed that my success was a communal pot from which they could scoop whenever they pleased. I realized then that arguing was useless. Words meant nothing to people who rewrote reality to suit their needs. I needed something harder than words. I needed steel. I pulled out my phone. "Who are you calling?" Ray asked, his eyes narrowing. "If you call the cops, I will tell them you are having a mental breakdown. I will tell them you invited us and then snapped. Who do you think they will believe? The distraught daughter or the calm, retired father?" "I'm not calling the police," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Not yet." I dialed a number I had looked up in the car, just in case. It was a 24-hour emergency locksmith service. "Yes, I am at 420 Oak Haven Drive," I said into the phone, loud enough for them to hear. "I am the homeowner. I have been locked out of my property by unauthorized occupants. I need an emergency entry and a lock change. Immediately. Yes, I have identification. Yes, I have proof of ownership. 20 minutes? I will be waiting." I hung up and folded my arms. Ray let out a bark of laughter. "You called a locksmith? You think a mechanic is going to kick me out? I am inside the house. Lily, possession is 9/10 of the law." "We'll see," I said. The next 20 minutes were a surreal standoff. Ray went back inside and sat on my sofa, my white linen sofa, and put his feet up on the coffee table. Sloane stayed in the doorway, filing her nails. Kendra kept filming, narrating a sob story about how I was harassing our poor, aging father. I stood on the driveway, motionless, watching the house that I had spent 3 years paying for, waiting for the cavalry. A white van pulled up. Franklin's secure lock key. A man stepped out. He was large, wearing a blue uniform shirt with the name Mike stitched on the pocket. He carried a heavy clipboard and a tool belt that jingled as he walked. He looked like a man who had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. "You the homeowner?" Mike asked, looking at me. "I am," I said. "She is not." Ray shouted from the doorway. He stepped out, puffing out his chest. "I am the resident here. This is a domestic dispute. Buddy, you can get back in your truck." Mike stopped, looking from me to Ray. He didn't look intimidated. He looked bored. "I got a call for a lockout. Standard procedure says I need to verify ownership before I touch a lock." "I told you I live here," Ray blustered. "My things are inside. My woman is inside." "That doesn't mean you own it," Mike said calmly. He turned to me. "Ma'am, do you have the deed or a mortgage statement? Driver's license?" "I have digital copies of everything," I said. I unlocked my phone and pulled up the county property records I had saved, along with my digital deed. I handed the phone to Mike. He adjusted his glasses and squinted at the screen. He scrolled down, checking the parcel number, checking the address. Ray laughed again, a sound that was starting to crack around the edges. "Go ahead. Check it. You will see the name Whitmore. That is me. Ray Whitmore. I am the patriarch of this family. It is Whitmore property." Kendra moved closer with her phone, zooming in on the locksmith. "Look at this. Guys, my sister is trying to evict her own dad from the family home." Mike looked up from the phone. He looked at Ray, then he looked at the house, and finally, he looked back at me. His expression changed. The boredom vanished, replaced by a flicker of understanding. He looked at Ray with a distinct lack of respect. "Sir," Mike said, his voice heavy with authority, "you say your name is Whitmore?" "That is right," Ray said, smiling smugly. "Ray Whitmore. And you say this is your house?" "It is the Whitmore house," Ray declared. "Whitmore is the name on the deed." I said nothing. I didn't move. I just watched Mike's eyes. Mike looked down at the digital document one last time. He cleared his throat. "The name on this deed isn't Ray Whitmore," Mike said. Ray frowned. "What? Don't be an idiot. It says Whitmore." "It says Whitmore," Mike agreed. He paused, letting the silence stretch out, heavy and suffocating. "But the first name isn't Ray." Mike turned the phone screen toward Ray, but he spoke to the air. his voice loud and clear enough for Kendra's recording and for the neighbors across the street. "The owner of record is Lily Whitmore." Ray froze. The smile slid off his face like oil. "What?" "Lily Whitmore." Mike read again. He looked at me. "Is that you, ma'am?" "It is," I said softly. Ray stared at me. You changed your name back? You are Scott? You have been Scott for 5 years." "I am Lily Scott professionally," I said, my voice cold. "But when I bought this house, I bought it under my maiden name. I bought it as a Whitmore, but not your kind of Whitmore." Ray looked at the locksmith, then at Sloane, who had stopped filing her nails. The confidence was evaporating, replaced by a dawn of confusion. He had banked everything on the assumption that Whitmore meant his. He had assumed that because I carried his name, I carried his debt. "It doesn't matter," Ray stammered. "It is still the same last name. It implies family trust." "It implies a specific legal individual," Mike corrected, handing my phone back to me. He unhooked a heavy drill from his belt. "And that individual is standing right here, and she isn't you." Mike walked past Ray, right up to the front door where Sloane was standing. "Ma'am, I am going to need you to step aside." Mike said to Sloane, "I have been hired by the owner to secure this property." "You can't do this," Sloane hissed, clutching her robe. "We have rights." "You have a suitcase," Mike said dryly, "and unless you have a lease agreement signed by Ms. Lily Whitmore, you are currently trespassing." I watched Ray's face turn a shade of pale gray I had never seen before. He looked at the house, then at me. For the first time, he didn't look like a giant. He looked like a thief who had been caught with his hand in the jar, only to realize the jar was made of glass, and everyone could see inside. "Open it," I said to Mike, and as the drill bit whirred to life, cutting through the shiny brass lock they had installed, I stood on my driveway and didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a judge, and the sentencing was just beginning. The sound of the drill biting into the metal of the deadbolt was loud. A harsh, grinding mechanical scream that drowned out my father's sputtered protests. Mike, the locksmith, was efficient. He did not look at Ray. He did not look at Sloane. He was focused entirely on the job I had hired him to do. But while he worked on the physical lock, I turned my attention to the digital one. Mike's question about the deed had triggered something in my brain, a cold, analytical itch that I could not scratch until I saw the data. I stepped away from the door, moving toward the edge of the driveway where the signal was stronger. I looked down at my phone. My hands were no longer shaking. The adrenaline had curdled into a frosty, high-resolution focus. I was no longer a daughter being gaslit. I was a UX researcher conducting a root cause analysis of a system failure. I opened my cloud storage app, navigating to the folder labeled House Documents. I needed to see what I had just shown Mike, but I needed to look closer. I pulled up the deed. It was there, the digital scan I had saved 3 years ago. But as I zoomed in, something looked wrong. The file in my Sent folder, the one I had forwarded to myself from an old email account, was not the crisp, high-definition PDF I remembered receiving from the title company. The edges of the text were fuzzy. There was a faint gray line running down the left margin, the telltale artifact of a physical scanner bed. The resolution was low, grainy. I checked the metadata. Date modified. 2 weeks ago. My breath hitched. I had not opened this file in years. I scrolled back through my email outbox. Searching for the original thread, I found it, but there was a forwarded message attached to it. One I did not remember sending. It was sent to an email address that consisted of a string of random numbers and letters, the kind used by burner accounts or spam bots. Then I remembered. 5 years ago, right after my divorce, I was a mess. I was drowning in paperwork, changing names, closing joint accounts, trying to untangle my identity from my ex-husband. Ray had offered to help. "Let me keep a copy of your important papers in my safe," he had said. "You are moving around too much. You might lose them. I will keep them safe." I had given him copies. I had given him my social security card, my birth certificate, and the final divorce decree. I had handed him the keys to my identity because I thought he was my father. I closed the Cloud app and opened my credit monitoring service. My finger hovered over the icon. If my suspicion was right, the damage would be visible. I tapped the screen. The dashboard loaded. A bright red arrow pointed downward. My credit score, which I had meticulously rebuilt to an 800 after the divorce, had dropped. It had plummeted by 60 points. I tapped the Alerts tab. New hard inquiry. Date: 14 days ago. I clicked for details. The inquiry was from a lender I did not recognize, a company that specialized in high-risk, fast-approval home equity lines of credit, a HELOC. The air in my lungs turned to ice. They were not just trying to live here. Living here was the cover story. The real objective was the equity. My house was worth $1.2 million. I had paid a significant down payment and had been aggressive with the mortgage. There was at least $400,000 of accessible equity sitting in these walls. Ray and Sloan were trying to borrow against my house. I looked up at them. Ray was now on his phone, pacing aggressively near the garage, his back to me. Sloan was watching the locksmith with a look of pure, venomous calculation. They looked like desperate people. They looked like people who needed money fast and had found a piggy bank they thought they could break open without anyone noticing. I looked back at my phone. I needed to know how far they had gotten. A hard inquiry meant they had applied. To apply. They needed more than just a name. They needed a social security number. They needed a current address. I navigated to the Personal Information tab on the credit report. This section usually listed previous addresses, employers, and phone numbers. I scrolled to the bottom, to the section labeled Current Address. It did not say 420 Oak Haven Drive. It said 1984 Maplewood Lane. That was Ray's address. The timeline clicked into place with terrifying precision. 2 weeks ago, someone had logged into a credit bureau or filled out a change of address form. They had diverted my financial mail to Ray's house. That was why I hadn't received any alerts by mail. That was why I hadn't seen the inquiry letter. They had intercepted everything. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. I did not have time to be sick. I had to stop the bleeding. I immediately toggled the switch to freeze credit. I did it for TransUnion, then Equifax, then Experian. I set a fraud alert on all three, adding a note that no credit was to be extended without verbal verification from me at my personal phone number. Then I started building the case file. I created a new folder on my phone. I named it Evidence. I took a photo of the new lock that Mike had just drilled out, the shiny brass cylinder lying on the doormat like a bullet casing. I went to Instagram and screen-recorded Kendra's livestream. She was still filming, still narrating her twisted version of events, unaware that she was providing me with time-stamped video evidence of their unauthorized presence and their admission of changing the locks. I took a screenshot of the strange text message I had received after the dinner. Don't let them touch your papers. I downloaded the full credit report as a PDF, and then I did one last check. I went to the county assessor's website. This was public record. Anyone could look it up. I typed in my address. The page loaded. I scrolled down to the ownership history section. I saw the transfer date from 3 years ago, and there, in the owner field, was the name, Lily Whitmore. I stared at it. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. When I bought this house, my divorce was fresh. I was technically still using the name Scott on my driver's license because the DMV appointment was weeks away. But my lawyer, a sharp woman named Eleanor, who had seen too many women lose everything, had given me advice that I had followed blindly at the time. Buy the house in your maiden name, she had said. Or better yet, buy it as an unmarried woman using the name you intend to keep. Make a clean break. Do not let the name Scott appear on this title. It complicates the asset division if your ex comes back. So I had done it. I had signed the papers as Lily Whitmore. I had legally reclaimed my name on the most expensive purchase of my life before I had even changed it on my library card. Ray had seen Whitmore on the paperwork and his narcissism had filled in the blanks. He saw Whitmore and thought clan. He thought patriarchy. He thought mine. He didn't realize that Whitmore on that piece of paper was not an extension of him. It was a declaration of independence from him. It was the specific legal entity of the daughter he had underestimated. I looked at the screen, at the name Lily Whitmore staring back at me in bold, black pixels. It was not just a name anymore. It was a shield. It was the ironclad proof that this property had absolutely nothing to do with the family Ray claimed to lead. I took a screenshot of the property record. I had the lock. I had the video. I had the credit inquiry. I had the fraudulent address change. And I had the deed. Mike the locksmith pulled the old lock core free with a final clunk. The door was open. "We are in," Mike said, wiping his hands on his pants. Ray spun around. "You can't go in there," he shouted, moving to block the door. "That is my private property inside." I walked up the driveway. I held my phone in my hand like a weapon. I didn't look at the house. I looked at Ray. "The only thing private inside that house," I said, my voice low and steady, "is the fraud you are trying to commit." Ray's mouth snapped shut. His eyes darted to my phone, then to my face. He saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a hurt child. It was the look of a prosecutor who had just found the smoking gun. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, but the bluster was gone. He looked small. "I think you do," I said, "and I think we need to wait right here until the new keys are in my hand." I stood my ground, the digital dossier in my pocket burning with the heat of 1,000 lies exposed. They had tried to steal my future by rewriting my past, but they had forgotten that in the modern world, paper trails never truly disappear. They just wait to be found. The locksmith, Mike, was busy installing a temporary deadbolt, the drill whining and short, sharp bursts that seemed to saw right through the thick tension hanging over the driveway. Ray was pacing near the hydrangeas, muttering into his cell phone, his back turned to me in a performance of wounded pride. Sloane was sitting on one of the moving boxes in the foyer, watching me with eyes that were too calm, too predatory for someone who had just been caught trespassing. She looked like a chess player analyzing the board, not a displaced resident. I stepped away from the noise, retreating toward the hood of my car. My phone felt heavy in my hand, vibrating with the ghost of that unsigned message. "Don't let them touch your papers." The warning had been the only thing that made sense in the last 48 hours. I opened the thread. My thumb hovered over the keypad. I typed 2 words, abandoning all politeness. "Who is this?" The response came almost instantly, 3 dancing dots transforming into a block of text. "My name is June. I was a friend of your mother, Sarah. We worked together at the library years ago, before she passed. I also spent 20 years as a records clerk for a small real estate firm in Nashville. I have been watching your father's posts, and I recognize the woman. My mother." The mention of her name sent a sharp pang through my chest. She had died 7 years ago, quietly, worn down by an illness and, I often suspected, by the exhausting gravity of Ray's ego. If this woman was her friend, she was an ally from the grave. I typed back, "What do you mean you recognized her?" June didn't reply with text. She sent a photo. It was a digital scan of a physical photograph, slightly grainy, taken perhaps 5 or 6 years ago. It showed a crowded room, likely a holiday office party or a networking mixer. There were balloons in the background and people holding plastic cups of cheap wine. In the foreground, leaning against a high-top table, was Sloane. She looked younger, her hair a darker shade of brunette, but the smile was identical, tight, practiced, and devoid of joy. But it was the man standing next to her that made the blood drain from my face. He had his arm around her waist, a proprietary grip. He was older, balding, with a distinctive port wine-stained birthmark on his left cheek. I knew that face. I had sat across a mahogany table from that face 3 years ago. It was the notary public who had handled the closing on this house. He was the independent broker Ray had recommended, the one who had squeezed me in on a Sunday to get the papers signed. My hands started to shake, not from fear, but from a sudden, freezing clarity. This wasn't just my father finding a new girlfriend who happened to be greedy. This was a setup. June's next text bubbled up. "That is Sloane with Marcus Dean." He lost his license last year for notarizing forged quitclaim deeds. Sloane isn't a girlfriend. Lily, she is a closer. She finds men with assets and emotional vulnerabilities, and she brings the paperwork. She has done this in Memphis. She has done this in Knoxville. Now she is in Franklin. I looked up at Sloane. She caught my eye and offered a small, chilling smirk before looking away. She didn't know I had the photo. She didn't know the invisible thread connecting her to the very paperwork I had signed to buy this home was now visible to me. This was a ring, a coordinated effort. Ray wasn't just the villain. He was the Trojan horse. They had used his entitlement and his financial desperation to get inside the gates, and now they were dismantling the fortress from the inside out. What do I do? I typed, my fingers clumsy. June's advice was precise, written with the authority of someone who had seen thousands of property disputes. Go to the county clerk's office immediately. Do not trust the papers in your email. Do not trust the papers in your father's safe. Request a certified, historical copy of your deed and the full title abstract. You need to see if there have been any filings in the last 30 days. Quitclaims, liens, power of attorney recordings, anything. I thought about the deed I had just looked at on my phone. The one with the low resolution and the fuzzy edges. I had assumed it was just a bad scan. Now, I realized it might be a fabrication, a placeholder sent to keep me pacified while they altered the reality of the official record. And Lily, June wrote again, check the exact name on the title, the specific spelling. Everything hinges on that. I closed my eyes. Thinking back to the day I bought the house, I was 26, fresh out of a divorce that had left me feeling raw and exposed. My ex-husband had been like Ray, controlling, entitled. My lawyer, Eleanor, a shark of a woman in a silk suit, had given me advice that I had thought was paranoid at the time. Do not buy this house as Lily Scott, Eleanor had said, tapping her pen on the desk. If you buy it as Scott, and your name change isn't fully processed through Social Security, he can try to tie it to marital assets. Buy it in your maiden name. Buy it as a separate legal entity. Create a firewall. So I had signed every document as Lily Whitmore. At the time, it felt like a regression, like I was moving backward into my father's shadow. But now, standing in the driveway with the wind biting at my cheeks, I realized it was the greatest accidental weapon I possessed. Ray heard Whitmore and heard ownership. He heard Whitmore and assumed the property fell under the jurisdiction of the family patriarch. He thought the name bound the house to him. But legally? Lily Whitmore was a stranger to Ray Whitmore. She was a single woman, unrelated to his debts, unconnected to his household, and protected by the ironclad specificity of property law. He was bragging that the house belonged to a Whitmore, unaware that the Whitmore on the paper was the one person he could not control. I looked at the credit report I had downloaded earlier, the inquiry for the home equity line of credit. The pieces slammed together. They didn't just want to live here. They didn't just want a sunroom. June's final message arrived, delivering the verdict that made the hair on my arms stand up. They are not looking for a home. Honey, they are looking for a bank. They are trying to pull the equity out. If they get a loan against the house, they will take the cash, disappear, and leave you with the mortgage and the lien. They want to turn your house into an ATM. I stared at the screen until the backlight dimmed. A home equity line of credit on a property worth $1.2 million could easily be $400,000 or $500,000. That was the goal. Ray was in debt. Ray was always in debt, chasing get-rich-quick schemes that failed, and Sloane was the mechanism to fix it. They would drain the equity, ruin my credit, and leave me to foreclose on a hollow shell. I put the phone in my pocket. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just fighting for bricks and mortar anymore. I was fighting a criminal enterprise that had worn the mask of my father. All done, Mike called out. He was holding a set of new, silver keys. I walked over to him, moving with a new purpose. Ray stepped forward, his hand out, assuming he would be given a key. I will take those, Ray said, his voice booming with false authority. I stepped in front of him. I didn't look at his face. I looked at his hand. the hand that had never lifted a finger to help me build this life, but was ready to snatch it away. "No," I said. I took the keys from Mike's palm. The metal was cool and sharp against my skin. "These stay with me," I said. "And nobody enters this house until I see what is on the hard drive at the county clerk's office." Ray's face turned purple. But I didn't stay to watch the explosion. I had a title search to run, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who the enemy was. It wasn't just a bad father. It was a thief who had been sleeping in my guest room. The text message arrived on Wednesday morning, vibrating against the hardwood of my desk like a trapped insect. I had spent the last 24 hours in a state of high-functioning paranoia, building a fortress of paper trails and digital firewalls. I had not slept. I was running on caffeine and the cold. Clean fuel of betrayal. I looked at the screen. "Kendra, can we meet? Coffee? Just us. We need to talk like adults. 10 a.m. at the Iron Bean." I stared at the name, Kendra, my younger sister, the one I had tutored in algebra, the one I had bailed out of credit card debt twice before I finally learned to say no, the one who had stood in my driveway yesterday, filming me for internet clout while strangers drilled the lock out of my front door. Talk like adults. It was rich coming from her, but I knew I had to go. I didn't go for reconciliation. I didn't go for an apology. I went because in any investigation, you eventually have to interview the accomplices. And Kendra, with her desperate need for approval and her loose lips, was the weak link in Ray and Sloane's operation. I arrived at the Iron Bean at 5 minutes past 10. I was always punctual. But today, I made a point of being late. I wanted her to wait. I wanted her to sit in the discomfort of her own thoughts. The coffee shop was noisy, filled with the clatter of ceramic mugs and the hiss of espresso machines. It smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, a cozy atmosphere that felt jarringly at odds with the cold war I was fighting. I spotted Kendra immediately. She was sitting at a corner table, huddled over a large iced latte, her thumbs flying across her phone screen. She looked tired. Her makeup was a little too heavy, hiding dark circles, and she was wearing a designer hoodie that I knew she couldn't afford. I walked over and sat down without getting a drink. I placed my leather tote bag on the floor and folded my hands on the table. Kendra jumped, her phone clattering to the table. She looked up, her expression shifting instantly from boredom to a practiced, pleading look of concern. "Lily," she said, letting out a breathy sigh. "You came. I wasn't sure you would." "I'm here," I said. My voice was flat. "You said you wanted to talk." Kendra took a long sip of her latte, buying time. She swirled the straw, staring at the ice cubes. "Look, about yesterday, and the dinner, it was all just a big misunderstanding. Things got heated. You know how Dad gets." "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "Changing the locks on my house was a misunderstanding? Trying to squat in my living room was a misunderstanding?" "Squat is such an ugly word," Kendra said, wrinkling her nose. "They just needed a place to land. Lily, Dad he is going through a lot right now. And Sloane, she is really helping him. She is getting him organized. She is good for him." "Sloane is a grifter, Kendra," I said. Kendra's eyes flashed. "You don't know her. You haven't been around. You have been too busy in your big house, living your perfect life, while the rest of us have been actually taking care of Dad. Sloane stepped up when you stepped out." "I didn't step out. I escaped," I corrected. "And if she is so good for him, why does she need my house to prove it?" "She doesn't need it," Kendra insisted, her voice rising to a whine. "They just thought it made sense. Dad feels like he has a right to be there. He is your father. He feels like you owe him a little respect." "Respect is not a deed," I said. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a tissue or a wallet. I pulled out a manila folder. I opened it and slid 3 pieces of paper across the sticky wooden table. They fanned out like a winning poker hand. The first was the photo of the brass lock lying on my doormat. The second was the printout of the credit inquiry from the predatory lender. The third was the screenshot of the county property record, the name Lily Whitmore circled in red ink. Kendra looked down. She tried to look away, but the papers demanded attention. "What is this?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "That," I pointed to the credit inquiry, "is a hard pull on my credit report. It happened 2 weeks ago. It is for a home equity line of credit. Do you know what that is, Kendra?" She didn't answer. She chewed on her straw. "It is a loan against the value of a house," I explained, my voice clinical. "My house. Someone tried to borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars using my property as collateral. Someone who isn't me." Kendra's face went pale. The bronzer on her cheeks stood out in stark relief against her skin. She knew. Her reaction wasn't shock. It was fear of discovery. "And this," I pointed to the property record, "is the deed. Do you see the name? It doesn't say Ray Whitmore. It says Lily Whitmore. That is me, not the family, me." Kendra pushed the papers back toward me, as if touching them would burn her. "Why are you showing me this? I don't know anything about banking stuff. That is Dad's business." "It became my business when he tried to steal my identity," I said. "And don't lie to me. Kendra, you are not a good liar. You never have been." "I'm not lying," she snapped, her defensive reflex kicking in. "You are just obsessed with money. That is all you care about. You sit there with your 6-figure job and your $1.2 million house, and you judge us. You have no idea how hard it is for Dad right now. He has debts, okay? Real debts. He was just trying to find a way to fix things so we could all be okay. By defrauding me? By using an asset that is just sitting there," Kendra hissed, leaning forward. "You don't even use the equity. It is just dead money to you. Dad said he would pay it back. Sloan said they had a plan to flip some investments and pay off the loan before you even noticed. They weren't stealing. They were borrowing. Without my permission, that is stealing. Kendra." "You would have said no," she shouted, causing a few people at nearby tables to turn and look. She lowered her voice, trembling with indignation. "You always say no. You are selfish, Lily. You have always been the selfish one, keeping everything for yourself." I looked at my sister. I saw the jealousy that had been festering in her for years, fed by my father's narrative. Ray had taught her that my success was a personal insult to her failure. He had weaponized her envy. "I worked for everything I have," I said quietly. "But that isn't the point right now. The point is the paperwork." I leaned in, locking eyes with her. I needed the final piece of the puzzle. I needed the mechanic of the crime. "How did they get my information, Kendra?" She blinked, looking at her lap. "I don't know." "Yes, you do," I said. "To apply for that loan, they needed more than just my name. They needed my social security number. They needed the exact details from my original deed to reference the parcel numbers. They needed digital copies. I keep my physical papers in a safe deposit box. My digital files are encrypted." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Who gave Sloan the copies?" Kendra picked up her latte, her hand shaking. She took a sip, but the cup was empty. The straw made a hollow, sucking sound. "Kendra," she slammed the cup down. "I didn't know what they were for, okay? Sloan just asked me if I had access to the old family cloud account, the one Mom used to use." My stomach dropped. The family cloud account. I hadn't thought about that in years. It was a shared storage space we used to upload vacation photos and school projects when I was in college. "And?" I prompted. "And I looked," Kendra said, her voice small and petulant. "There was nothing there. But then I remembered you sent me an email years ago. Back when you were buying the house, you forwarded me the inspection report because you wanted me to see the backyard." I remembered. I had been excited. I wanted to show my little sister the garden. I had forwarded the entire thread from the realtor. "The inspection report," I said. "What else was in that thread? Kendra?" "I don't know," she muttered. "A bunch of attachments. The title abstract, the preliminary deed, some tax forms." "And you forwarded that email to Sloan," I stated. It wasn't a question. "She said she wanted to see the square footage," Kendra cried. "She said she wanted to help Dad plan the furniture layout. She said she wanted to surprise you by fixing up the guest room. I thought I was helping. You sent her my tax forms and my deed, I said, feeling a cold numbness spread through my limbs. You handed her the keys to my financial life. I didn't know she was going to use them for a loan. Kendra insisted, tears welling up in her eyes, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a child caught breaking a vase. I just wanted them to like me. Lily, Sloane is actually nice to me. She listens to me, unlike you. She listens to you because you are useful, I said brutally. She used you to get to me. Kendra wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her expensive hoodie. Well, it doesn't matter now, does it? You stopped them. You changed the locks. You won. You always win. I haven't won anything, I said. My credit is damaged. My family is trying to rob me, and my sister is an accomplice to fraud. Kendra recoiled as if I had slapped her. I am not a criminal. I am your sister. Then tell me the truth, I said. Are they still trying? Did they file anything else? Did Ray sign anything? Kendra looked away, biting her lip. She was hiding something. Kendra, I don't know, she whispered. Sloane mentioned something about a quitclaim. She said if they couldn't get the loan, they would just secure the title. She said Ray had the right to sign it over to himself because of some loophole. What loophole? I don't know, Kendra snapped. Something about you being unmarried and him being the next of kin. I don't understand the legal stuff. I just know they went to a notary yesterday, before you arrived. My heart hammered against my ribs. A notary. Yesterday. Who was the notary? I asked. Was it a man with a birthmark on his face? Kendra's eyes widened. How did you know that? That was the confirmation. The circle was closed. Ray Sloane, the crooked notary, Marcus Dean, and Kendra, the unwitting courier. I gathered the papers from the table and slid them back into the folder. I stood up. The coffee shop suddenly felt suffocating, the air too thick with roasted beans and lies. You need to leave, I said to Kendra. And you need to tell Dad that I know about the notary. Tell him I know about Marcus Dean. Kendra stood up too, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and defiance. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that this wasn't just a family squabble. This was legal warfare, and she was standing on the wrong side of the trench. You are making a mistake, Lily, she said, her voice trembling. If you do this, if you go after Dad, you will lose the whole family, Uncle Jerry, Aunt Linda, everyone. They will all side with him. You will be completely alone. I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had tried to protect, the sister who had sold me out for a kind word from a stranger in a silk robe. I thought about the dinner where no one spoke to me. I thought about the empty chair at the end of the table. Kendra, I said, hoisting my bag onto my shoulder. I am not losing the family. I turned to walk away, then paused and looked back at her one last time. I already lost it the moment you all decided my house was worth more than my trust. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the bright, blinding sunlight of Franklin. I didn't look back. I had my confirmation. They had weaponized my own sister against me. Now, I had to stop them before they filed that quitclaim deed. I dialed my lawyer's number before I even reached the car. It was time to stop playing defense. I drove straight from the coffee shop to the glass-fronted building in downtown Nashville that housed Hawthorne Pike Legal. I had done my research in the car, looking for a firm that specialized in high-asset civil litigation and real estate fraud. I didn't want a strip mall lawyer who handled traffic tickets and divorces. I needed a shark in a tailored suit. I met with Elias Thorne, a senior partner with silver hair and a gaze that seemed to dismantle lies before they were even spoken. I sat in his office, which smelled of old paper and expensive leather, and I laid everything out. The credit inquiry, the photo of the lock, the text messages from June, and the recording of Kendra's live stream. Thorne listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he capped his pen and looked at me. This is not a domestic dispute, Ms. Scott, he said, his voice grave. This is a coordinated attempt to hijack a title. They are testing the perimeter of your ownership. The lock change was a probe. The credit inquiry was a probe. Now that those have failed, they will escalate to fabrication. Fabrication? I asked. They need a piece of paper that overrides yours, Thorne explained. Since they cannot get you to sign a legitimate quitclaim deed, they will likely try to forge one, or they will fabricate a power of attorney that gives your father the right to act on your behalf. We need to get ahead of the paper trail. Thorne moved with a speed that was comforting. Within the hour, his paralegals were drafting a barrage of legal filings. First, we sent a formal request to the county clerk for a certified, historical copy of the original deed, including a full chain of title and an audit log of any recent access or modification attempts. We needed to know if anyone had tried to file a correction or an amendment in the last 30 days. Second, we filed a comprehensive identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission and the local police department. In the report, I explicitly named Ray Whitmore and Sloan Mercer as suspects in an ongoing attempt to defraud me of real estate assets. Writing my father's name on a police report felt like severing a limb, but I remembered his face in my driveway, the entitlement, the lack of remorse, and my hand remained steady. We are also sending a cease and desist letter, Thorne said, reviewing a document on his screen. It will be served to them by a process server, not by mail. It states that they are barred from the property at 420 Oak Haven Drive, and that any further attempt to access the home or the equity will result in immediate civil and criminal prosecution. Will that stop them? I asked. It might slow them down, Thorne admitted. But people like this, people who feel the world owes them a living, they usually don't stop until they hit a wall they can't climb. We are building that wall. I left the law firm feeling lighter. But the day wasn't over. I had one more call to make. I sat in my car and dialed the fraud department of the lender that had made the inquiry on my credit report. After navigating a maze of automated menus, I finally reached a human being. "My name is Lily Scott," I said, my voice crisp. "I am calling regarding a hard inquiry on my credit report dated 14 days ago. I did not authorize this inquiry, and I am flagging it as fraudulent." The agent on the other end tapped on a keyboard. "I see the inquiry here. Ms. Scott, it was for a home equity line of credit application. The application was suspended because of a mismatch in the employment verification, but it is technically still open." "Close it," I said, "and mark the file. The applicant was likely using a falsified address. My address is 420 Oak Haven Drive. The applicant was likely using 1984 Maplewood Lane." "I see that address on the file," the agent confirmed, sounding surprised. "We have a copy of a utility bill uploaded as proof of residence." "That is a falsified document," I said. "I have never lived at Maplewood Lane. I am working with legal counsel. If this application proceeds one step further, I will name your bank in the lawsuit." "I am locking the file now, ma'am," the agent said quickly. "It is flagged." I hung up. I had secured the perimeter. Now I had to secure the interior. I returned to my house. The new locks were solid, but they weren't enough. I spent the afternoon installing a high-definition security system. I placed cameras at the front door, the back door, and crucial angles covering the driveway and the street. These weren't the bulky cameras of the past. They were discreet, hidden in the eaves and the doorbell, connected directly to a cloud server that Ray couldn't touch. I also placed a small, motion-activated camera inside the foyer, just in case. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, my reclaimed kitchen, with the lights off, watching the feed on my iPad. I felt like a spider waiting in the center of a web. I knew they wouldn't give up. Sloan had too much to lose, and Ray was too desperate. For 2 days, it was quiet. The cease and desist letters had been served. I received a furious voicemail from Ray, screaming about how I was dragging the family name through the mud and how legal letters were an act of war. I didn't reply. I just saved the audio file and forwarded it to Thorne. But on the third day, the camera covering the street caught something. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. I was at work, sitting in a meeting about user interface flows. when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Motion detected. Driveway. I slid my phone under the conference table and opened the app. A black sedan had pulled up to the curb, just outside the range of where a visitor would park. It wasn't Ray's truck. It wasn't Kendra's car. Sloane got out of the passenger side. She was wearing sunglasses and a trench coat, looking around nervously. She didn't come to the house. She stayed by the car. A moment later, the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was balding, with a heavy build and a distinct reddish birthmark on his cheek. Marcus Dean, the notary. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I zoomed in on the video. The quality was crystal clear. Marcus was holding a large manila envelope. He placed it on the hood of the black sedan. He pulled out a document, a thick stack of legal-sized paper. He smoothed it out against the metal of the car. Sloane leaned over. She had a pen in her hand. I watched, holding my breath. As she signed the document, she signed it once, then she turned the page. She signed again, then Marcus Dean took a stamp out of his pocket. He pressed it onto the paper. Thump! Even without audio, I could imagine the sound of the notary seal hitting the page. They were notarizing a document on the hood of a car in the middle of a suburban street. It was sloppy, it was desperate, and it was illegal. I recorded the clip, saving it to my secure folder. Then I texted Thorne. I have them. They are manufacturing the deed right now. Video evidence. Thorne called me 3 minutes later. I stepped out of the conference room into the hallway. Describe what you saw, Thorne commanded. Sloane signed a multi-page document, I said, keeping my voice low. Marcus Dean notarized it. They didn't even go inside. They did it on the street. That is a quitclaim deed, Thorne said, his voice hard. Or a power of attorney. They are going to try to file that with the county clerk to override your title. They are betting that the clerk won't check the signature closely, or that the notary stamp will give it enough authority to pass through the system. We have to stop them, I said. I can call the police right now. No, Thorne said. If you call the police now, they will claim it was a misunderstanding. They will claim they were signing something else. They will destroy the document before anyone sees it. So what do? We let them try to use it, Thorne said. For fraud to be fully prosecutable, there usually needs to be an attempt to execute the document. We need them to present that forgery to a person of authority and claim it is real. That is when the trap snaps shut. I don't want them filing it at the county, I said. Once it is in the system, it is a nightmare to untangle. We won't let them get to the clerk, Thorne said. We will force them to present it to us. You need to create a situation where Ray feels compelled to prove his ownership, a situation where he has to slam that paper down on a table and say, "This is mine." I thought about it. Ray wanted access. He wanted into the house. He wanted to change the locks back. I can do that, I said, a plan forming in my mind. Ray is obsessed with the locks. He hates that I locked him out. If I offer a meeting, a reconciliation meeting at the house to discuss the property, make sure there are witnesses, Thorne advised, and make sure he brings the paper. Tell him you are willing to review his claim if he can prove it. I will, I said. I will tell him to bring the deed. Good, Thorne said. I will have a title expert and a neutral observer on standby. We will create a formal environment. If he produces a forged deed in that setting, he is handing us his own indictment. I hung up the phone. I watched the replay of the video one more time. Sloane signing her name, or perhaps my name, on the hood of a car. It was pathetic. It was the act of people who thought they were smarter than the system. I went back into my meeting, but my mind was already writing the script for the final scene. I wasn't going to fight them in the street. I was going to invite them to their own execution. I waited until that evening to send the text to Ray. I kept it brief, devoid of emotion, the kind of text a defeated daughter might send. Dad, I am tired of fighting. If you really have paperwork that proves the house is family property, I am willing to look at it. Bring Sloane. Bring the deed. Come tomorrow at 5. I will have a locksmith there to change the keys if you can prove you are right. It was the bait he couldn't resist. It appealed to his greed and his vanity. He would think I was crumbling. He would think the family pressure had worked. He would walk right into my driveway with a fake deed in his hand, thinking it was a winning lottery ticket. He didn't know it was a warrant. The silence following my text invitation was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating stillness of a predator crouching in tall grass, waiting to see if the prey has truly stopped running. I had set the trap, but the 48 hours leading up to the confrontation were a masterclass in psychological warfare orchestrated by Sloan Mercer. She did not attack me directly. That would have been too obvious, too easy for my lawyer, Elias Thorne, to document. Instead, she attacked the air around me. She attacked my reputation. She attacked my standing in the community I had called home for 3 years. It started with a notification on my phone from the neighborhood community app, a digital bulletin board usually reserved for lost cats and complaints about garbage pickup. A post had been trending in the Franklin Neighbors group. It was written by Sloan. She hadn't used my name, of course. She was too smart for libel, but the details were specific enough that anyone on Oakhaven Drive would know exactly who she was talking about. "Please keep an elderly father in your prayers today," the post read, followed by a praying hands emoji. It breaks my heart to see families torn apart by greed. When a child forgets who raised them and locks their own flesh and blood out in the cold over a property dispute, you really have to wonder where our values have gone. We are just trying to find a peaceful resolution, but some hearts are hardened by money. I sat at my kitchen island, staring at the screen. The comments were already rolling in. "So sad. Praying for you." Kids these days have no respect. Sloan was painting a picture where she and Ray were the victims of a heartless, wealthy daughter. She was isolating me. She was preparing the battlefield so that if the police were called again, the neighbors would already be biased against me. They wouldn't see a homeowner protecting her rights. They would see the cruel daughter from the internet post. I wanted to reply. I wanted to scream the truth in the comments section, that they were fraudsters, that they had forged documents, but Thorne's advice rang in my ears. Silence is your strongest weapon right now. Do not engage. Let them think they are winning the narrative. So I let the comments stand. I let them judge me. 2 hours later, the intercom at my front gate buzzed. I checked the monitor. It wasn't a guest. It was the private security patrol for our subdivision. I walked to the door, my stomach twisting. I opened it to find a uniformed guard standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable. "Ms. Scott?" he asked, checking a clipboard. "Yes?" "Ma'am, we received a complaint regarding this residence," he said. "A call came in about a disturbance, harassment of a resident." I blinked, confused. "I am the only one here. I am working quietly in my office. Who called?" The guard shifted his weight. "A Ms. Mercer called. She stated that she is a resident of this property and that you are effectively blocking her access and creating a hostile environment. She wanted it noted on the security log." My blood ran cold. Sloan wasn't even here. She was miles away, probably sitting in a hotel room or at Ray's house, but she was calling security to create a paper trail. She was establishing a record of tenancy by calling and complaining as a resident and having the security guard document it. She was building a history. If this went to court, she could pull these logs and say, "Look, I lived there. I even called security for protection." "Ms. Mercer does not live here," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "She is a trespasser who was removed from the property 2 days ago. I am the sole owner. Do you want to see the deed?" "That won't be necessary, ma'am," the guard said, backing away. "I just have to log the complaint. It is policy." He left, but the damage was done. Sloan was gaslighting the institutions designed to protect me. She was turning my own home security against me. Then came the call from Ray. It was late afternoon. The sun was slanting through the blinds, casting long, prison bar shadows across the floor. My phone rang. "Dad." I debated not answering, but I needed to maintain the illusion that I was wavering, that I was open to negotiation. I picked up. "Hello, Dad?" "Lily," Ray said. His voice was different. The aggression from the driveway was gone. The entitlement was dialed back. He sounded old. He sounded tired. He sounded like the father I had worshipped when I was 6 years old. I just wanted to call and say I am sorry it got this far. Ray said. A heavy sigh crackled through the speaker. This isn't us. Lily, police, lawyers. We are Whitmores. We don't do this. You changed my locks, Dad, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I know, he said quickly. And that was a mistake. I see that now. Sloane, well, she gets overzealous because she cares about me. She sees me struggling with my arthritis, worrying about the bills, and she just wanted to help. We didn't mean to steal anything. We just needed a place to rest for a few months. Just until I get my pension sorted out. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was weaponizing his frailty. He was inviting me to be the bigger person. I have a solution, Ray continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Sloane typed up a little agreement. Nothing fancy, just a simple paper that says we can stay in the guest wing for 6 months. We will pay for our own groceries. We won't touch your main house. Just 6 months, Lily. Then we are gone. We just need to sign it so Sloane feels secure, and then we can drop all this legal nonsense. We can be a family again. For a second, a split second, the little girl in me wanted to say yes. I wanted the fighting to stop. I wanted my dad back. But then I looked at the folder on my desk. I looked at the credit inquiry. Send me the document, I said. I will look at it. No need for lawyers, Ray said hastily. Just between us. I can bring it over tonight. Bring it tomorrow at 5, I said. To the meeting. I hung up and immediately called Thorne. I told him about the offer. Do not sign that paper, Thorne said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. If you sign a document granting them permission to stay for a specific period, you are granting them a leasehold interest. They become legal tenants. You won't be able to kick them out for 6 months. And after that, if they refuse to leave, you will have to go through a formal eviction process that could take a year. They don't want to visit. Lily, they want rights. Once they have a lease, they can use that to establish residency for other things, like loans. I won't sign, I promised. I just wanted to hear him ask. He is desperate, Thorne noted. The nice guy act is the last resort before the nuclear option. Be careful. That evening, Kendra texted me. It was a long block of text, rambling and full of typos, sent at 1 a.m. Lily, please just stop this. Dad is a wreck. He is crying in the kitchen. Do you have to be so cruel? Sloane is trying to fix everything, but you are making it impossible. She spent all morning on the phone with her friend at the land recording office just trying to clear up the paperwork mess you caused. Can't you just let it go? I froze. I reread the text. She spent all morning on the phone with her friend at the land recording office. Kendra, in her attempt to guilt-trip me, had just handed me a smoking gun. Sloane wasn't just forging documents on the hood of a car. She had in contact on the inside. She was trying to find a way to slip the fake deed into the official system. That was why they were stalling. That was why Ray wanted the 6-month agreement. It was a distraction to buy time while they doctored the records. I forwarded the text to June. June responded 10 minutes later with a dossier that made my skin crawl. It wasn't official court documents. Those would take weeks to pull. But it was something better. It was the Whisper Network. I made some calls to my old contacts in Knoxville. June wrote, Sloane Mercer isn't her only name. She went by Sloane Miller 5 years ago. There was a case in a gated community there. She moved in with an older man, took care of him, and when his children tried to sell the house after he died, she produced a handwritten lease granting her lifetime tenancy. The family settled with her for $50,000 just to get her out. She is a professional squatter. Lily, she knows the tenancy laws better than most lawyers. She knows that if she gets a toothbrush in that bathroom and a piece of mail in that mailbox, she owns you. I felt a wave of nausea. This was her business model. She found vulnerable families, inserted herself like a virus, and then demanded a ransom to leave. My father wasn't her partner. He was her host, and I was the target. Then came the final piece of intelligence. I was scrubbing through my email trash folder, looking for any other forwarded messages I might have missed, when I saw a confirmation email from a digital notary service. It had been sent to my old email address, the one I had shared with Ray years ago, but I had auto-forwarding set up to my current account. It had gone to spam because the sender was flagged as suspicious. Appointment confirmation. Mobile notary service. Client. Ray Whitmore. Date. Tomorrow. 4:30 p.m. Contact number. 555-019-2834. I recognized the number. It wasn't Ray's. It was Sloane's cell phone. They had scheduled a notary for 30 minutes before our meeting. They weren't coming to the meeting to negotiate. They were coming to ambush me. They were going to sign a fresh, forged document right before they walked into my house, hoping that the ink would still be wet enough to look like the truth. I sat back in my chair. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. They thought I was the scared daughter who would crumble under the pressure of family. They thought I would sign their 6-month lease to stop the neighbors from gossiping. They thought they were walking into a living room to bully a young woman. They were wrong. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Thorne. The trap is set. They are bringing a fresh forgery. I have the time and the intent. Bring the team. I decided then to go completely dark. No more texts to Kendra. No more answering Ray's calls. No defending myself on the neighborhood app. I let the silence stretch out. Vast and terrifying. I wanted Sloane to feel confident. I wanted her to think I was hiding under my covers, afraid to face them. I wanted her to strut up that driveway with her head held high, holding her fake papers, believing she had already won, because the higher she held her head, the better the camera angle would be when the trap snapped shut. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the wind against the windows, knowing that tomorrow, at 5 o'clock, the fiction of the Whitmore family would finally be dismantled. One lie at a time. The hours leading up to the 5 o'clock confrontation were not filled with the nervous pacing I expected. Instead, my dining room had been transformed into a war room. Elias Thorne sat at the head of the table, his laptop open, flanked by a forensic document examiner named Sarah, whom he had brought in as a consultant. The air smelled of stale coffee and the ozone scent of laser printers. At 2:30 in the afternoon, my phone pinged. It was an email from Ray. The subject line was blank. The attachment was a single PDF file named Updated Deed Final, PDF. They sent it, I said, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. They sent the proof. Thorne didn't look up. Forward it to the main screen. I cast the document to the large monitor we had set up on the sideboard. The image flickered to life. It was a quitclaim deed, a legal instrument used to transfer property interest from one person to another. At a glance, it looked official. It had the county seal in the top corner. It had the dense, archaic language of property law. It listed the grantor as Lily Whitmore and the grantees as Ray Whitmore and Sloane Mercer, with rights of survivorship, and at the bottom, in blue ink, was my signature. I stood up, walking closer to the screen until the pixels blurred. My breath hitched in my throat. It was my signature. It wasn't a shaky forgery or a close approximation. It was the exact loop of the L, the sharp cross of the T, the way the Y trailed off at the end. It was the signature I had used for years. I didn't sign this, I whispered. I swear to you, Elias, I have never seen this paper in my life. Sarah, the examiner, leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. Zoom in on the signature block, 400%. I did. The blue ink became a jagged river of pixels. Look at the pixelation around the edges of the stroke, Sarah said, pointing with a pen. See that faint gray halo? And look at the background noise, the tiny speckles of white that don't match the paper grain of the rest of the document. What does that mean? I asked. It means this isn't a wet signature, Sarah said, her voice clinical. It is a lift. Someone took a high-resolution scan of your signature from another document, removed the background using Photoshop or a similar tool, and pasted it onto this PDF. Then they printed it out and scanned it again to hide the digital artifacts. It is a composite forgery. But where did they get it? I asked. I haven't signed anything for them in years. Think back, Thorne said. Ray is your father. He has had access to you during vulnerable transitions. Did you ever sign a document for him? Insurance? A car title? A beneficiary form? The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was 3 years ago. I was sitting in Ray's kitchen, crying. The week after my divorce was finalized, I was a wreck. Ray had put a cup of tea in front of me and a stack of papers. Just sign these. Honey, he had said, his voice soothing. It is just to keep you on the family auto insurance plan so you save some money, and this one is just a medical proxy in case you get sick. Let Dad handle the boring stuff. I had signed blindly, gratefully, thinking he was taking a burden off my shoulders. I hadn't read the text. I had just signed the bottom of the page. The insurance papers, I said, feeling sick. He had me sign a blank page at the bottom. He said the printer had jammed and cut off the text, but he needed the signature to mail it out that day. That is the source, Sarah confirmed. He kept that page. He scanned it. And he has been holding on to your signature like a loaded gun, waiting for a target big enough to use it on. But there is more, Thorne said, interrupting my spiral of betrayal. He pointed to the top of the document on the screen. Look at the header, the recording stamp. I looked. It said Williamson County Register of Deeds, followed by a long alphanumeric code. The font, Thorne said. The county clerk uses a specific monospace font for their recording stamps. It is ugly and archaic. This font? This is Times New Roman, and the code format is wrong. The county uses a 12-digit sequence starting with the year. This code starts with REC. This document wasn't generated by the county. It was generated on a home computer. It is a fake, I said. It is a sloppy fake, Thorne corrected. But to an untrained eye, like a patrol officer or a locksmith, it looks real enough to cause confusion. That is their plan. They don't need to win in court. They just need to create enough doubt on the doorstep to get the police to say, "This is a civil matter. We can't kick them out." Once they are inside, they win. My phone buzzed again. It was June. I found the motive. The text read, "And it is worse than debt." I opened the attachment she sent. It was a screenshot from a private forum for real estate investors. A thread dated 6 months ago. The user handle was Ray Soaz Invests. The post read, "Need fast liquidity for a guaranteed 10 times return on a land development deal in Florida. I have a high-value asset, but title is complicated. Need a bridge loan of $400,000 immediately. Will pay 20% interest." June followed up with a second text. The Florida deal was a scam. The developers vanished 2 months ago. Ray put $50,000 of his own money into it, money he likely borrowed from loan sharks or took from his retirement. He is wiped out. Lily, he is drowning. He owes money, I said aloud. He is broke. It is worse than that, Thorne said, reading the text over my shoulder. If he is desperate enough to promise a 20% return, he is dealing with dangerous people, or he is facing total bankruptcy. So he wants to sell the house? I asked. No, Thorne said. Selling takes too long. Selling requires inspections and public listings. He wants the equity. Thorne walked to the whiteboard and drew a diagram. This is the twist, he said. Ray and Sloan don't just want to live here. Living here pays 0 bills. They want to execute a cash-out refinance or a HELOC. If they can get their names on the deed for even 24 hours, they can go to a predatory lender, like the one that ran your credit, and sign for a loan of $500,000 against the house. And then they take the cash, Thorne said. They pay off Ray's debts, they pocket the rest, and they leave you with the mortgage and the new lien. When you fail to pay the $500,000 you didn't know you borrowed, the bank forecloses. You lose the house. Ray walks away clean because he will claim you authorized it. The room spun. It wasn't just theft. It was financial assassination. They were planning to hollow out my life to fill the hole in theirs. We need to stop this, I said. Now. Way ahead of you, Thorne said. My paralegal just filed a notice of fraud and a lis pendens with the county clerk. That puts a giant red flag on your property title. If anyone tries to record a new deed or a mortgage against that address today, the system will lock down. It effectively freezes the asset. So they can't sell it? They can't even borrow a library book against it right now, Thorne said with a grim smile. But they don't know that yet. Good, I said. I don't want them to know, not until they are standing in my driveway. Suddenly, the security app on my iPad chimed. Front door camera. I looked at the feed. It wasn't Ray. It was a courier. He dropped a large envelope on the porch and left. I went outside and retrieved it. It was addressed to occupant. I opened it. It was a letter from a lawyer. A cheap, strip mall lawyer based in Knoxville. The letterhead looked like it had been designed in Microsoft Word. To Ms. Lily Scott. The letter began, "Please be advised that my client, Ms. Sloan Mercer, asserts a claim of equitable interest in the property at 420 Oakhaven Drive. Ms. Mercer has established tenancy through the movement of personal effects and has contributed significantly to the improvement of the property, specifically the installation of new security hardware and landscape maintenance." I laughed. It was a dark, hysterical sound. "She is claiming the lock," I said, handing the letter to Thorne. "She is claiming that breaking into my house counts as a home improvement." "It is the squatter's pivot," Thorne said, scanning the letter. "Since the ownership claim is shaky, she is trying to pivot to tenancy rights. She is saying, 'I live here, I fixed the place up. You can't kick me out without an eviction hearing.' She wants to drag this out for months. She says she moved personal effects," I said. "She moved 2 suitcases and a box of old magazines. In Tennessee, the law can be murky if someone establishes residency," Thorne warned. "If she can prove she slept there, or that she contributed to the household, a judge might let her stay while the case is argued. We cannot let her establish that narrative." I looked at the clock. It was 4:15. They would be here in 45 minutes. They would bring the fake deed. They would bring the fake story about tenancy. They would bring the full weight of their gaslighting. "I know how to end this," I said. "I don't want to just win in court. Elias, I want to win on the pavement. I want them to look me in the eye and realize they lost." "What do you propose?" Thorne asked. "We let them make their speech," I said. "We let Ray wave that fake deed around. We let Sloan talk about her equitable interest. And then, I have one condition." I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Mike, the locksmith who had helped me 2 days ago. "Mike," I said when he answered, "I need you to come back. Yes, today. At 5 o'clock, I need you to bring a new deadbolt, a smart lock, the most expensive one you have." "Another lockout?" Mike asked. "Not exactly," I said. "I want you to install it, but I have a specific instruction. I want you to verify the owner before you screw it in, and I want you to do it in front of an audience." I turned to Thorne. "The condition is simple," I told him. "I will tell Ray that I will hand over the keys and accept his paperwork, but only if the locksmith reads the deed aloud and verifies the owner on the spot. If the deed is real, the locksmith gives Ray the key. If it is not," Thorne finished, "then Ray has just presented a forged document to a third-party witness in the presence of legal counsel." "Exactly," I said. "He traps himself." Thorne nodded slowly. "It is theatrical. It is high risk. But if it works, it gives us the mens rea, the criminal intent. We need to put them away." I went to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. I didn't see the scared girl who used to sign insurance forms to make her daddy happy. I saw a woman who owned a $1.2 million fortress. "Let them come," I said. "I am ready to read the fine print." The atmosphere on my front porch at 5 o'clock was not that of a family reunion. It was the stifling, pressurized air of a courtroom before the gavel falls. The sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn, but the electric tension on the concrete steps made the air feel static and hot. I stood with my back to the front door, the heavy oak barrier I was defending. To my right stood Elias Thorne, my attorney, looking like a statue carved from granite in his charcoal suit. Beside him was Sarah, the forensic document examiner, holding a slim leather portfolio against her chest, and next to her, looking uncomfortable but resolute, was Mike the locksmith, clutching a new, high-security smart lockbox and a heavy clipboard. We were the defense. Then, the opposition arrived. They came in a formation that was almost comical in its transparency. Ray led the charge, wearing a blazer over a polo shirt, trying to project the image of a casual but authoritative patriarch. Sloane walked a half-step behind him, dressed in soft pastels, a cardigan draped over her shoulders, the costume of a fragile victim. Kendra brought up the rear, holding her phone down at her side, though I noticed the red recording light blinking steadily. They stopped at the bottom of the steps. The distance between us was only 10 feet, but it felt like a canyon. "Well," Ray said, his voice booming a little too loudly for the quiet street. He looked at Thorne, then at Mike, and finally at me. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at my forehead, a trick he used when he was lying. "I see you brought an audience. Lily, I thought we were going to handle this like family." "We are handling this like property owners." "Dad," I said. My voice was calm, stripped of any emotion. "You said you had paperwork. You said you had a claim. I am here to listen." Sloane stepped forward, dabbing at a dry eye with a tissue. "We just want peace, Lily. It breaks Ray's heart to be treated like a criminal on the driveway of a house he helped build." "He didn't help build this house," I said. "He has never even mowed the lawn." "He built the family," Sloane corrected, her voice trembling with practiced sorrow. "He built the name. And isn't that what matters? You are casting out your own father because you are obsessed with control. It is unfilial. It is cruel." She turned slightly, making sure her profile was caught by Kendra's camera. "We are willing to forgive the lockout. We are willing to forgive the harassment from your security guards. We just want to go inside, sit down, and sign the agreement Ray told you about, a simple 6-month stay. Is that too much to ask of a daughter who has so much?" It was a good performance. If I hadn't seen her signing a forgery on the hood of a car 24 hours ago, I might have felt a twinge of guilt. Ray reached into his blazer pocket. He pulled out the document I had seen on the screen, the forgery with the pasted signature. He held it up, but he didn't hand it over. He waved it like a flag. "I have the deed right here," Ray announced. "Updated and notarized. It clarifies the family interest. It shows that Sloane and I have rights of survivorship. It proves that this house is a Whitmore asset." He took a step up. "Now, tell your mechanic to step aside so I can open my door." "Stop," Thorne said. It was a single word, spoken at a conversational volume, but it had the weight of an anchor dropping. Ray froze, one foot on the first step. "We are not using that document," Thorne said. "Excuse me?" Ray bristled, his face reddening. "This is a legal deed." "That," Thorne said, pointing a finger at the paper in Ray's hand, "is a piece of creative writing. We are not here to debate the validity of a PDF you printed at Kinko's. We are here to act on the official record." Thorne nodded to Sarah. She opened her leather portfolio and extracted a single document. It was cream-colored, heavy stock paper. In the corner, an embossed gold seal caught the fading sunlight. It was the certified, historical chain of title, pulled directly from the county archives that morning. "This is the official deed," Thorne said. "Certified by the county clerk at 9 o'clock this morning. It supersedes anything you think you have in your pocket," Ray scoffed. But his eyes darted nervously to Sloane. She gave him a subtle nod, a silent command to hold his ground. She believed her own lie, or at least, she believed that the Whitmore name was a catch-all safety net. "Fine," Ray said, forcing a laugh. "Use your paper. It says the same thing. It says Whitmore. I checked the online records myself. It says Whitmore." "Excellent," I said. "Then we agree. The deed dictates the lock." I turned to Mike. "Mike, you are a licensed locksmith. What is the protocol for a lock change in a disputed situation?" Mike cleared his throat. He looked at Ray, then at me. He hated this. I could tell. But he was a professional. Standard protocol, Mike recited, his voice gruff, is that I must verify the identity of the requesting party against the deed of the property. I take my orders only from the individual named on the title. Go ahead then, Ray said, spreading his hands magnanimously. Read it. Read the name Whitmore and let's get this over with. He looked at me with a triumphant sneer. You thought you were so smart. Lily, changing your name back and forth? But you bought this house before you were fully Scott again. You bought it as a Whitmore. And as long as you are a Whitmore, you are mine. Sarah handed the certified deed to Mike. The silence that descended on the porch was absolute. A bird chirped somewhere in the oak tree, a sharp, piercing sound that highlighted the quiet. Kendra stopped shifting her weight. Sloane stopped dabbing her eyes. Ray stood with his chest puffed out, waiting for his vindication. Mike adjusted his glasses. He looked down at the document. He traced the line with his thick, calloused finger. I am looking at the grantee section, Mike announced. Read it, Ray commanded. Read the last name. The last name is Whitmore, Mike said. Ray clapped his hands together once, a sharp crack of victory. There, you see? Whitmore, family property. Now open the door. I wasn't finished, Mike said. Ray's smile faltered. What? I need to verify the full legal entity, Mike said. He looked up from the paper, his eyes locking onto Ray's. The name on this deed is not Ray Whitmore, and it is not the Whitmore family. Mike looked back down at the paper. He took a breath, and then he read it, loud and clear, projecting his voice so that even the neighbors across the street could hear. The owner of record is Lily Whitmore. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The name hung in the air like smoke. Ray blinked. He looked at Mike, then at the paper, then at me. His brain was misfiring. He was trying to process data that contradicted his entire worldview. That is the same thing, Ray stammered, his voice losing its boom. Lily Whitmore. She is my daughter. She is a Whitmore. It is the same estate. No, sir. Thorne stepped in, his voice cutting like a scalpel. It is not the same estate. Lily Whitmore is a specific, individual legal person. She is a sole proprietor. Her assets are not transferable by blood. They are not communal. Unless your name is Lily, you are a stranger to this document. Ray's face went slack. The arrogance drained out of him, leaving behind a confused, frightened old man. He turned to Sloane. Sloane, you said the name was the key. You said if it was Whitmore, we had a right. Sloane was staring at me. Her mask had cracked. The weeping victim was gone, replaced by a woman who realized the floor had just dropped out from under her. Her eyes were darting back and forth, calculating, processing the loophole that had just snapped shut on her fingers. That is impossible, Sloane snapped. The venom in her voice was sudden and shocking. She isn't a Whitmore. She changed her name to Scott 5 years ago. She shouldn't be on the deed as Whitmore. The words rushed out of her mouth before she could stop them. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. And how do you know that? Sloane? I asked softly. Sloane froze. Her mouth clamped shut. But it was too late. How do you know the specific timeline of my name change? I pressed, taking a step toward her. Ray didn't know. He just assumed. But you knew I was Scott. You knew the deed said Whitmore. You thought it was a clerical error you could exploit. Didn't you? Ray told me, she stammered, backing up. Ray didn't know, I said. Ray thought Whitmore meant him, but you knew it meant a loophole. You researched my divorce decree, didn't you? You pulled the public records. You saw the discrepancy in the dates and you thought, aha, she used the wrong name. The title is weak. We can challenge it. Sloane's face turned a mottled red. She had revealed her hand. She wasn't a supportive girlfriend helping a confused man. She was a researcher who had done due diligence on a hostile takeover. It doesn't matter, Sloane shrieked, abandoning the calm act entirely. It is a fraudulent filing. You can't hold property under a name you don't legally use. That deed is invalid. Actually, Thorne interrupted, crossing his arms. Tennessee law allows an individual to hold title in a maiden name as long as the identity is verifiable, and since Lily Whitmore and Lily Scott are the same person, and not Ray Whitmore, the deed stands. Thorne turned to Mike. Mike, who is the owner of this house? Lily Whitmore, Mike said firmly. And who is standing right here? Thorne pointed to me. Lily Whitmore, Mike said. And does Ray Whitmore have any rights to this property? Mike looked at Ray, who was now trembling, clutching his fake deed with white knuckles. None that I can see, Mike said. Mike turned his back on Ray. He turned his back on Sloane. He walked up to the door, raised his drill, and positioned it over the strike plate. Proceeding with the lock change for the owner, Mike announced. The sound of the drill was deafening in the silence. It whirred and ground against the metal. A mechanical declaration of victory. Ray looked at the drill. He looked at the closed door. And then, slowly, he looked at me. The realization was finally hitting him. He wasn't getting in. He wasn't getting the money. He wasn't getting the 6 months. Lily, Ray whispered, you are embarrassing me. No, Dad, I said, watching the wood shavings fall onto the doormat Sloane had bought. You embarrassed yourself. I am just reading the minutes of the meeting. Kendra lowered her phone. She looked at Sloane, then at Ray. She looked at the fake paper in Ray's hand, then at the gold-sealed document in Mike's hand. For the first time, the reality of the situation seemed to penetrate her denial. He lied, Kendra whispered, looking at Ray. You said it was our house. It should be, Ray shouted. Suddenly finding his voice again, he waved the fake deed at me. I paid for your life. I raised you. You owe me this. You can't hide behind a piece of paper and a name change. I am not hiding, I said. I am standing right here, and that paper isn't a shield. Dad, it is a receipt. I bought this life. I paid for it, and you are not on the bill. Sloane grabbed Ray's arm. Her eyes were hard, calculating the exit strategy. Ray, stop. Don't say anything else. No! Ray shook her off. He stepped toward me, his face twisted in ugly entitlement. I am your father. I command you to open this door. Mike stopped drilling. He turned around, holding the drill like a weapon. He didn't speak. He just stared at Ray. Thorne stepped forward, placing his body between Ray and me. Mr. Whitmore, Thorne said, his voice low and dangerous. You are currently trespassing. You are holding a forged legal document. And you are menacing the homeowner. We have a police cruiser on standby around the corner. Do you want to leave? Or do you want to continue this conversation in the back of a squad car? Ray stopped. The threat of police, real police, pierced through his delusion. He looked at the house, the $1.2 million asset he had already spent in his mind, and saw it drifting away like smoke. He looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes. There was only the hatred of a man who had reached for a crown and grabbed a handful of thorns. You are no daughter of mine, he spat. I know, I said softly, watching the last screw of the new lock turn into place. According to the deed, I am just Lily. The sound of the drill winding down was the only noise in the neighborhood. It was a mechanical finality, a period at the end of a very long, very loud sentence. Mike, the locksmith, blew the wood dust off the new strike plate. He did not look at Ray. He did not look at Sloane. He turned his back on them completely, a gesture of professional dismissal that stung more than any insult could have. He walked over to me. In his palm sat 2 silver keys, gleaming in the fading Tennessee sunlight. They were heavy, substantial keys, cut for a high-security cylinder that couldn't be picked or bumped. Ms. Whitmore, Mike said, using the name on the deed with deliberate emphasis. Your property is secured. These are the only keys in existence. The old hardware has been drilled out and destroyed. Thank you, Mike, I said, closing my hand over the cold metal. Ray made a noise in his throat, a strangled sound of protest. You cannot give her those keys. My things are in there. Sloane's things are in there. Then you can wait on the curb until Ms. Whitmore decides to grant you access to retrieve them, Elias Thorne said, stepping forward. He opened his briefcase, the snap of the latches echoing like gunshots. But before we discuss your personal effects, we need to discuss your legal standing. Thorne pulled out a document I had signed earlier that afternoon. It was a formal affidavit of forgery and identity theft. My office has formally logged the document you are holding, Thorne said, pointing to the fake deed in Ray's hand. We have already transmitted a digital copy of the fraudulent file you emailed to the district attorney's fraud unit. We have flagged the font discrepancies, the invalid recording codes, and the lifted signature. Ray dropped the hand holding the paper to his side. The paper crinkled, suddenly looking very flimsy. It was a draft, Ray stammered, pivoting weakly. It was just a mock-up. We were going to discuss it. You presented it as a legal instrument to a tradesman to gain entry, Thorne corrected. That is uttering a forged instrument. That is a felony, Mr. Whitmore. And since you attempted to use it to facilitate a high-value loan, it is also wire fraud. Sloane stepped back, putting distance between herself and Ray. She looked at the driveway, at the street, anywhere but at me. She was calculating the blast radius, trying to figure out if she was far enough away to survive the explosion. I didn't know, Sloane said, her voice thin and reedy. Ray handled the paperwork. I just signed where he told me to. I am a victim here too, I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. A victim? I asked. Is that what you were when you were standing on the hood of a black sedan yesterday morning? Sloane's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. I have video. Sloane, I said, holding up the phone. High definition, time-stamped video from my security cameras. I watched Marcus Dean put that document on the hood of his car. I watched you read it, I watched you sign it, and I watched him stamp it. You weren't a passive girlfriend signing a birthday card. You were executing a fraud. I swiped the screen, playing the clip. Even from 10 feet away, she could see herself. She could see the damning evidence of her own hand moving across the paper. You knew exactly what you were doing, I said. You were creating a fake chain of title so you could leverage the equity. You wanted to turn my house into a cash machine for Ray's debts. Ray looked at Sloane. You said it was standard procedure. You said Marcus could fix the title issues. Shut up, Ray, Sloane hissed. Her mask completely gone. Her face was twisted into a snarl of desperation. You are the one who is broke. You are the one who begged me to find a way to get the money. Don't put this on me. It is on both of you, Thorne interjected. And we have more. Thorne pulled out the confirmation letter from the bank, the one regarding the home equity line of credit inquiry. The bank has confirmed that the application for the loan used a falsified address, Ray's address, to divert the mail. Thorne stated, Ms. Scott has signed an affidavit confirming she did not authorize the inquiry. The bank has now classified the application as criminal identity theft. They are tracing the IP address used to submit the form. When they trace it back to your laptop, Sloane, or your Wi-Fi, Ray, the federal charges will follow. Ray looked at the ground. He looked old. The bluster, the arrogance, the patriarch act. It had all evaporated. He wasn't a king anymore. He was just a man who had tried to steal from his own daughter and gotten caught. Lily, Ray whispered. Please. He took a step toward me, his hands open. I can fix this. I will pay back the $50,000 I owe the investors. I will get a job. I will sell the truck. Just don't send me to jail. Don't ruin the family name. You ruined the name when you put it on a fake deed, I said. I am your father, he pleaded, tears actually leaking from his eyes now. Doesn't that mean anything? I made a mistake, a desperate mistake, but I did it for us, to save the family from ruin. You did it to save yourself, I said, and you were willing to burn my house down to do it. I will sign whatever you want, Ray said, his voice breaking. I will apologize. I will go to counseling. Just tell the lawyer to stop. Tell the bank it was a misunderstanding." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man I had spent my whole life trying to please. I realized that the Lily he loved was just a reflection of his own needs. He loved me when I was useful. He loved me when I was obedient. He didn't love the woman standing on the porch holding the keys to her own life. "I don't want your apology, Dad," I said. "And I don't want your promises. I just need it to stop. I need the lies to stop. I need the theft to stop. And the only way to make it stop is to make you face the consequences." Kendra let out a sob. She dropped her phone to her side. "Lily, please, think about what this will look like. Everyone will know. The internet. My friends." "You were the one live streaming, Kendra," I said, turning to my sister. "You wanted an audience. You wanted everyone to see the ungrateful daughter. Well, you got your wish. You chose to stand in your video. Now I am choosing to stand in my file." "But they will arrest him," Kendra wailed. "Then you should call a bail bondsman instead of a locksmith," I said. Sloane made one last, desperate attempt. She stepped toward the door, trying to physically occupy the space. "I have rights," she shouted, pointing a manicured finger at the house. "My clothes are in there. My medication is in there. I have established residency. You can't lock me out. That is an illegal eviction." Thorne stepped in front of her. He was a wall of charcoal wool. "There is no tenancy," Thorne said calmly. "There is no lease. There is no rental agreement. There is only a break-in. You entered the property by unauthorized means. Changing the locks without the owner's consent is considered forcible entry. Your belongings inside do not constitute residency. They constitute evidence of trespassing. If you try to enter that door again, I will have the officer around the corner arrest you for burglary." Sloane stopped. She looked at the door, then at Thorne, then at Ray. She realized the game was over. There was no settlement coming. There was no cash-out refinance. There was only the looming shadow of an indictment. "Fine," Sloane spat. "Keep your damn house. It has bad energy anyway." She turned and marched down the driveway, her heels clicking angrily on the concrete. She didn't look back at Ray. She walked straight to her car, got in, and slammed the door. She started the engine and peeled away, leaving my father standing alone on the pavement. Ray watched her go. He looked like a man watching a lifeboat leave the Titanic. Thorne handed Ray a clipboard. "This is a restraining agreement," Thorne said. "It states that you will not come within 500 feet of this property. It states that you will make no further claims on the title. It states that you will cease all contact with Ms. Scott regarding financial matters. If you sign this, we might recommend leniency to the district attorney regarding the jail time. We will still pursue the fraud charges, but we won't ask for a custodial sentence." Ray looked at the paper. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the pen. "Sign it, Ray," Thorne said. "It is the best deal you are going to get." Ray signed. He signed his name, Ray Whitmore, on a document that legally severed him from the daughter he had tried to consume. He handed the clipboard back to Thorne. He looked at me one last time. "I hope it is lonely in there," Ray said, his voice bitter and hollow. "I hope you enjoy your $1.2 million all by yourself." "I won't be lonely," I said. "I will be safe." Ray turned and walked down the driveway. He walked past the spot where his truck had blocked me in days ago. He walked past Kendra, who was still crying silently. He got into his truck, the engine sputtering as it turned over, and drove away. Kendra looked at me. She didn't say anything. She just shook her head, wiped her face, and got into her car. She followed him. The street was quiet. The neighbors had gone back inside. The drama was over. "We will handle the police report filing tomorrow," Thorne said, closing his briefcase. "You did good. Lily, you held the line." "Thank you, Elias," I said. "And thank you, Mike." Mike nodded, tipping his cap. "Enjoy your house, ma'am. It is a good lock. Nobody is getting through that unless you want them to." They left. I was alone on the porch. I turned to the door. I looked at the new lock. It was sleek, modern, and impregnable. I slid the silver key into the cylinder. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. The deadbolt retracted. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was quiet. It smelled of the sandalwood diffuser I had left on days ago, mixed with the faint, intrusive scent of Sloane's cheap perfume. I would have to air it out. I would have to hire movers to pack up their boxes and leave them on the curb. I would have to scrub the floors. But the air felt different. It didn't feel heavy anymore. I walked to the kitchen island. I put my keys down on the marble counter. I pulled the certified deed out of my bag, the cream-colored paper with the gold seal. I read the name again, Lily Whitmore. For years, I had thought of that name as a burden. I thought it was a tether to a past I wanted to escape, a reminder of the father who demanded everything and gave nothing. But looking at it now, I saw something else. I saw a woman who had bought a house when she was terrified. I saw a woman who had built a career, built a credit score, and built a sanctuary. I saw a woman who had stood on her porch and stared down a fraud ring masked as a family. The name wasn't his. It never was. He just shared it. I owned it. I wasn't Lily Whitmore because I belonged to Ray. I was Lily Whitmore because I belonged to myself. I walked to the front door. I looked out at the street one last time, at the empty driveway where the invaders had stood. Then, I closed the door. I turned the thumb turn on the smart lock. The bolt slid home with a sound that felt like a heartbeat. I was home. And for the first time, I knew exactly what that word meant. Family isn't the people who have the right to break into your life and take what you have built. Family are the people who respect the lock. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't a scream, or a lawsuit, or a public scene. Sometimes, the most devastating revenge is just standing still, holding your own keys, and letting a locksmith read the truth out loud for everyone to hear. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Helena Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, while cooking dinner, or maybe relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below. I love reading about where our community is from. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and press the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a little victory today.